I remember the first time I stepped into that house. There was something off about the way the air pressed against my skin, thicker somehow, like it was watching me. The realtor had smiled too broadly, her voice tight with practiced warmth, but her eyes flicked constantly to the corners, to the baseboards, to the silence between our footsteps. I was tired of city noise. After the divorce and the endless court dates, I wanted somewhere quiet, remote, old, and tucked away from prying eyes. The house on Belridge Lane promised that. A 2-story Victorian with faded blue siding and an overgrown garden that trembled in the wind like it had secrets to keep. I bought it on impulse. Maybe I should have paid attention to the fact that no one else had even made an offer in 10 years. I moved in during late September. The sky was already bruising earlier in the evening, and a chill clung to everything like a warning. I tried not to notice how the boards groaned beneath my weight, or how the walls seemed to hum, not with sound, but with vibration. Like the house breathed when I wasn't looking. The first night, I barely slept. I told myself it was just the newness. Strange acoustics, old pipes, the typical complaints of a house with history. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That the silence here wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the open door to the hallway, my ears straining for any noise beyond the creaks of settling timber. Nothing came. Just an oppressive, suffocating stillness. Then, around 3:17 a.m., I heard it. A tap. Soft. Measured. Like the slow drip of water onto hardwood. Then another. And another. A rhythmic, deliberate sequence that echoed faintly from beneath the floorboards. I froze. The sound came from under the room, my bedroom, on the second floor. Beneath me was the living room. I hadn't unpacked much yet, but I would have heard if something had fallen. No leaky pipes down there. No appliances even plugged in. I stood, padded barefoot to the corner of the room, and crouched. The tapping stopped the moment my fingers brushed the floor. I held my breath and waited, fingers splayed against the wood. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a deep thud, like something heavy had landed, directly beneath me. My heart jerked. I scrambled back to the bed and sat there until sunrise, my breath shallow, my ears alive with imagined footsteps. By morning, I had rationalized it. Old houses creak. Sometimes animals get inside. Maybe it was just a raccoon in the crawlspace. Still, I couldn't shake it. I made coffee, avoiding the living room entirely. The house had grown colder, the kind of damp cold that makes your bones ache before your skin even registers the temperature drop. I checked the thermostat, dead. I tried the breaker. Nothing wrong. I lit a fire in the hearth for the first time. That's when I noticed the smell. Not smoke. Something else, sweet and rotten, like mold blooming on old fruit. It seeped in through the vent beside the fireplace, curling around me, making the back of my throat sting. I opened the grate to check the vent, half expecting to find a dead mouse. What I found instead was a doll's head. Just the head. Porcelain. Cracked. Its left eye missing, the other fixed in a glassy stare. It sat wedged deep inside the metal duct, nestled in what looked like a small pile of dirt, or ash. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't touch it. I closed the vent and backed away, my hands shaking. That evening, I called a local handyman, Paul. Grizzled, quiet, and a lifer in the area. When I asked if he could check out the vent and maybe take a look under the floor, he hesitated. Said he knew the house. Had worked on it once before. Then, cryptically, he muttered, "That place ain't right." But money's money, so he agreed to come by the next morning. That night, the tapping started again. Earlier this time, just past midnight. Tap. 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 I tried to ignore it. Headphones, music, anything. But the sound grew louder, more insistent. The taps turned to scratching. Scratching became dragging. Like something with claws was pulling itself across the underside of the floor. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the edge of the bed, palms sweating, fists clenched. It's a rat. Just a goddamn rat. A possum. Something normal. Then the footsteps started. Not mine. Not upstairs. Downstairs. Heavy. Slow. Deliberate. Walking from one end of the living room to the other. I held my breath and waited for the sound of the front door opening. Maybe someone had broken in. But it never came. The steps just stopped. Right below me. I could feel it. Like someone standing just under the floorboards. Staring up. The silence that followed was unbearable. It wasn't empty. It was pregnant, with intent, with something waiting. And then 3 loud knocks, right beneath my feet. I jumped back with a shout, heart clawing up my throat. I ran to the hallway, down the stairs, flicking on every light I passed. The living room was empty. But the doll's head, it was now sitting in the middle of the floor. I swear to God I hadn't touched it. And that smell. That sweet, putrid smell. It was stronger now. Curling around the baseboards. Coming from beneath. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with a knife and a flashlight, listening. Waiting. When Paul showed up the next morning, I must have looked like hell. I let him in without a word and pointed toward the vent. He gave me a look, something between pity and fear, and got to work. An hour later he called me over. I don't like this, he muttered, gesturing toward the fireplace. The vent goes deeper than it should. Like there's more behind it. A crawl space or a sub-basement. There's no basement, I said. He gave me a strange look. Sure about that? He pulled aside some of the crumbling plaster near the hearth. Beneath it was a small, square panel, nailed shut. Old wood. Nails rusted through. We pried it loose. Behind it, a black tunnel. Narrow, made of stone, leading down into darkness. The smell hit us like a wave. Paul gagged and stumbled back. What the hell is that? I whispered, peering inside. He didn't answer. His flashlight caught something in the tunnel, something pale. Fabric, maybe. Or skin. Don't go in there, Paul said sharply, backing away. I'm telling you, man. This house, people used to talk. Said it was built on bad land. Buried things. I turned to him. Buried what? He didn't answer. Just muttered. Call a priest. Or burn the damn thing down. Then he left. Didn't even take his tools. And I was alone again, with the tunnel yawning open in my living room, and something in the darkness that was no longer content to stay beneath. I stood at the edge of the tunnel long after Paul's taillights vanished down the drive. The mouth of it gaped open like a wound in the foundation of my house. Even from a safe distance, I could feel the air leaking out of it, wet, stagnant, alive with decay. It had weight to it, that darkness. Like if I got too close, it would reach up and pull me in. But of course I got close. I told myself I only wanted a better look. I fetched a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. I didn't even bother with gloves or boots. Curiosity outweighed logic. And maybe a sliver of pride. It's your house now, get a grip. I crouched beside the opening and aimed the beam inside. The tunnel descended on a sharp slope, about 4 feet wide and maybe 5 feet high. The walls were rough stone, moss-covered, slick with condensation. The floor wasn't dirt, not exactly. More like compacted dust, gray and fibrous. Like skin cells and hair and mold had been crushed together by decades of weight and pressure. There were marks in the dust. I remember that vividly. Not boot prints. Not claws. Handprints. Dragging, chaotic, overlapping. As if someone, or several someones, had crawled through there. Or tried to escape. Something clinked against the flashlight's beam. I leaned forward. It was a ring. Small, gold, simple. The kind a child might wear. Lying half buried at the threshold of the crawlspace, as if left there deliberately. I picked it up with the tips of my fingers. Cold. Too cold. The moment I touched it, I heard the whisper. A thin, breathy hiss, barely more than a breeze, tickled the shell of my ear. Don't. I froze. The house had gone deathly still. No birds outside. No wind against the glass. Just that whisper lingering like a smudge on my eardrum. I bolted upright and dropped the ring. It bounced once, then rolled back into the tunnel, disappearing into the shadows like it had never existed. I slammed the panel shut and nailed it closed again. My heartbeat thudded behind my eyes. I told myself I would never open it again. I barely left the couch that night. Slept with the lights on, fire roaring, a butcher's knife within reach. But sleep did come. Eventually. Heavier than it should have. And thick with dreams. Dreams of stone walls closing in. Of tiny, bloodless fingers brushing my ankles in the dark. Of voices behind my walls, whispering in a language I didn't know but somehow recognized. One phrase repeating again and again. He hears you now. The next morning, I tried to act like everything was fine. I went to town. Bought groceries. Pretended I wasn't afraid to go back. But even in the daylight the house felt altered. The temperature never rose above cold. No matter how high I turned the thermostat, how many logs I threw in the fire, my breath still fogged in the air. I started hearing scratching in the walls. Soft at first. Like a mouse. Then louder. Deeper. The kind of scratching that comes from nails. Or claws. Or bone. It wasn't just at night anymore. It followed me from room to room. Scritch, scratch. Scritch. Scratch. Like something was burrowing through the wood. No matter where I went in the house, it stayed just out of sight. I tried recording it. My phone caught nothing but static. I called an exterminator, who showed up the next day, took one look at the tunnel after I foolishly showed it to him, and refused to enter the house. His words, I remember exactly. You're dealing with more than rats. That night was the worst yet. It started with the power flickering. Then a bang, a heavy, guttural thud from upstairs, like something had fallen hard. I raced up the stairs 2 at a time, flashlight in hand, calling out, "Hello? Who's there?" Stupid. Every door in the hallway was open. I hadn't left them that way. My bedroom, the guest room, the tiny nursery at the end, I had closed them all the day before. And then I heard running. Tiny footsteps. Across the floorboards above me. There is no attic. I know that for a fact. I checked the blueprints when I moved in. No access, no crawl space, just roofing. And yet I stood there beneath the ceiling, listening to small, rapid footsteps darting back and forth above my head. Then the laughing began. Childlike. Distant. Wrong. Not playful. Mocking. And it didn't echo through the house. It came from inside the walls. I ran. Down the stairs, back into the living room. The fire had gone out, completely snuffed. The vent panel by the fireplace was open again. Not broken. Not pried. Just open. As if something inside had crawled out. My flashlight flickered, then died. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and rot. I backed away until I hit the far wall, the cold seeping into my spine. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Wet, heavy breathing. Like lungs full of water. Just out of sight. Behind the couch. Near the kitchen door. In the shadowed corners of the room. The sound seemed to move, closer, then far away, then right next to me. I screamed. I didn't even realize I had screamed until I was halfway out the front door, barefoot in the gravel, heart battering my ribs. I ran down the street, didn't stop until I reached the diner 2 miles down the road. I must have looked insane. People stared. I called the sheriff. He came. Checked the house. Found nothing. No sign of a tunnel. No ring. No panel. The fireplace was solid brick. The sheriff said maybe I dreamed it, maybe I had a gas leak. Or maybe, I was under stress. Divorce trauma, post-move anxiety. He said it kindly, but I saw it in his eyes. He didn't believe me. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know something is living beneath that house. Something old. Something hungry. And now it knows me. After the sheriff left, I stood in my driveway staring at the house for a long time, the morning light slanting off its peeling blue siding. It didn't look like a place that could hurt anyone. From the outside, it was still just a sagging Victorian in need of love. But the longer I stared, the more I realized the front windows, my bedroom window especially, were wrong. From inside, that window faced the bed. From outside, the glass looked too far left. As if the bedroom was shifted somehow, or the window opened into a space bigger than the room I knew. I almost convinced myself it was just old construction quirks. But the thought wouldn't let go. There's more to this house than it shows you. That night, I avoided the living room. I didn't even look at the fireplace. I cooked in silence, ate in silence, trying to drown out the itch of being watched. Every shadow felt thicker. Every creak was deliberate. I kept my phone flashlight ready in my pocket, even while washing dishes. Around midnight, the house began to hum again, that low vibration I'd noticed my first night here. Not in the walls this time. In the floor. It was faint at first, almost like a cat's purr, but it grew until I could feel it through my socks. I stepped into a hallway, half expecting the scratching to start again. Instead, the hum seemed to pull me toward the back of the house. There was a door there I'd barely noticed before, a narrow, white-painted thing between the kitchen and the pantry. I'd tried it once on move-in day, but it had been locked. Tonight, the knob turned in my hand. The air that rushed out was cold. Stale. Not the smell of rot this time, something older, like dust that had been waiting 100 years to be disturbed. I flicked my flashlight on. A narrow set of wooden stairs descended into darkness. The blueprints hadn't shown stairs here. I told myself to shut the door. Nail it closed. Call someone? But my legs were already moving, my foot already testing the first step. The wood groaned, and I had the terrible thought that maybe the sound wasn't from my weight, but from something answering below. The stairs ended in a hallway. Stone walls. Damp. No windows. My light swept over peeling floral wallpaper in patches, as if someone had tried to make it look like a living space before giving up halfway through. The hum was louder here, vibrating through the walls, under my skin. I passed 3 closed doors on either side before reaching the end. They were all painted the same dull cream, no handles, just round holes where knobs should be. I pressed my ear to the first. Nothing. The second. Breathing. I jerked back so fast I hit the opposite wall. My flashlight wavered. My skin crawled. There was no doubt, it was someone, or something, breathing behind that door. I backed away, heart pounding, until my shoulders hit the final door at the end of the hall. This one was different, painted black. The paint bubbled and blistered like it had been burned. The wood beneath was warped. And the hum stopped. The silence hit like a punch. I didn't realize how much I'd been relying on that constant vibration until it was gone. Now the air felt expectant, every molecule holding its breath. My hand shook as I pushed the door open. It wasn't a room. Not in the sense of walls, ceiling, floor. It was a void. My flashlight beam vanished into black, eaten by it. I stepped forward, and the texture beneath my feet changed from stone to something softer. Fabric? No. Not fabric. It shifted and sank beneath my weight, like standing on a mattress soaked through. Then the smell hit me. Rot. Flesh. Copper. It clawed at my throat, made my eyes water. I gagged, turning away, but when I did, there was light. A soft, flickering glow far in the distance, like a candle flame. I moved toward it. Every step sank deeper. The glow pulsed faintly, in time with the faintest thump-thump. A heartbeat. When I was close enough, I saw what made the light. It wasn't a candle. It was an eye. A single, lidless, milky white orb, the size of a dinner plate, sunken into the far wall, or what I thought was a wall. It was slick, wet and watching me. Not moving. Just watching. My legs locked. My flashlight shook in my grip. And then, God help me, it blinked. The floor shifted beneath me. Not sank, shifted. Breathed. The realization hit me so hard I almost screamed. I was standing not in a room, but on something. The entire space was alive. That's when the whisper came again, this time from every direction, from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, inside my head. You're in me now. I bolted. I don't remember climbing the stairs, don't remember slamming the door behind me. I remember leaning against my kitchen counter, gasping, my socks soaked with something I didn't want to look at. When I finally checked, the door was gone. Not locked. Not hidden. Gone. Just smooth wall where it had been hours ago. And that hum? It's in the walls again. Louder now. By the next morning, I couldn't convince myself that what had happened in the night was a dream. My socks, still lying on the kitchen floor, were stiff with some dark, crusted residue that smelled faintly of iron. My flashlight was gone. And the hum that had filled the house since my first night here was louder now, vibrating faintly through the floor even when I stood barefoot in the middle of the room. I pressed my palm to the wall. Warm. Not room temperature, warm. Body warm. Like leaning against the skin of someone you didn't want to touch. I snatched my hand back, shivering. By noon, the scratching started again. It was different this time. Not the small, erratic scuttle from before, this was organized. Rhythmic. Like fingers drumming, slow and deliberate, directly beneath my feet. And wherever I moved in the house, it followed, always below, always in sync with my steps. The message was clear, it was tracking me. I tried to drown it out, TV on, music blaring, but every sound felt flat against that constant drumming. Even when I shut myself in the upstairs bathroom, I could feel the floor beneath my toes twitching, like something was testing the wood grain for weaknesses. At 3:03 p.m., the house went silent. Utterly silent. It was worse than the noise. I stayed in the bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet lid, gripping the handle of a hammer I'd grabbed from the toolbox. My heart pounded in the stillness, and my ears strained for even the smallest sound. That's when the door handle moved. Not a full turn. Just a subtle, slow twitch, like a muscle spasm. I stared at it, hardly breathing. Another twitch. Then a full, deliberate turn. The door creaked inward an inch. Nothing stood there. The hallway beyond was dim, though I'd left the upstairs lights on. My gaze dropped to the floor, and I saw it. A wet handprint. Small. Child-sized. Pressed into the carpet outside the door. The fibers still shifting, as though the hand had just been lifted away. I slammed the door and locked it. For 30 minutes, I sat there, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Then, faintly, from inside the wall behind me, came a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. From the other side of the drywall. I didn't stay in the bathroom much longer after that. I decided I was done waiting for whatever lived here to come to me. I'd call a demolition crew, hell, burn the place if I had to. But first I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I went downstairs to the living room. The vent by the fireplace, the one that had revealed the crawlspace, was shut, just like the sheriff had said. But when I crouched to look closer, I saw faint lines etched into the wood around it. Scratches. Words. I leaned in until I could read them. Let it up. The moment my eyes traced those words, something slammed against the vent from the inside. I staggered back, barely catching myself on the arm of the couch. The vent rattled again, harder this time. Dust and splinters rained down from the frame. I could hear it breathing on the other side, deep, ragged inhalations. The metal screws holding the cover in place began to turn. I ran. Upstairs, into my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My lungs burned, and for a moment I thought I might throw up. My mind was a chaos of thoughts. Call someone. Leave. Get the keys. Don't go downstairs again. That's when I saw the wet footprints. Not on the floor this time. On the ceiling. They stretched from one corner of my bedroom to the other, small and barefoot, the arcs of toes and heels perfectly visible against the plaster. They stopped directly above my bed. And dripped. The drips grew into a slow, steady leak. A dark, reddish liquid pattered onto the blanket. I stumbled back, watching the stains spread in the fabric. The smell hit me a second later, sweet, metallic, cloying. Blood. I bolted for the door. But it was locked. From the outside. I rattled the knob, slammed my shoulder into the frame, shouted until my voice broke, but nothing gave. Behind me, a slow creaking sound began overhead. Not the creak of wood under age, but the groan of something moving against it. I looked up just in time to see a small, pale hand pressed through the plaster. The fingers curled. It was coming down. I think I blacked out for a second, because the next thing I remember is being in the hallway, the bedroom door hanging open behind me, a hole in the ceiling yawning above the bed. The air was cold enough to hurt my teeth when I breathed. Somewhere downstairs, something heavy began climbing the stairs. And the smell, God, the smell, was stronger now, pouring up through the floorboards like smoke. I grabbed my keys from the table by the bathroom and ran for the stairs. The first step I took into the stairwell creaked louder than any creak I'd ever heard in my life, echoing through the entire house like a warning. The climbing stopped. For a moment, the silence pressed in so hard my ears rang. Then, slowly, one step at a time, it began moving up again. But faster. I ran. I didn't care about breaking my neck. I took the stairs 3 at a time, past the landing, through the front door. Except the front door wasn't there. The wall in its place was seamless, fresh painted wood. No handle, no hinges. Just smooth, unbroken surface where my escape should have been. And behind me, something exhaled. Long wet. Satisfied. It was upstairs now. The blank wall where the front door used to be was smooth under my palms, too smooth, grainless, faintly warm, a waxen heat that clung to my skin when I pulled away. I stood there breathing hard, chest burning, and felt the whole house breathe back into me, a slow tide in the walls, a sigh that wasn't mine. It's alive. I knew that now in my bones, not as a metaphor, not as a fever dream. The house took air, and with the next breath it would take me. Something moved on the landing behind me. Light footsteps. Bare. Wet. My name flickered in the air like a thought not yet spoken. I didn't turn. I couldn't. My hands went flat against the knot door, searching for a seam, a hinge, a weakness. Nothing. No nails, no joints, just that flawless plane of not wood and not skin and not wall, perfectly still until I pressed a little harder and felt a slow, yielding give, the way the inside of a cheek gives beneath your tongue. I staggered back, gagging. The hum that had lived in the house since the first night rose a notch, then another, like someone was reaching for a volume knob and finding there was more to turn still. The bulbs in the hallway buzzed, flared, then dimmed to a pulse. Thump thump. Walls. Thump thump. Floor. Thump thump. Inside my chest. The rhythms braided until I could not tell which heartbeat was mine. Don't run, I told myself, ridiculous even as I thought it. You can't. Turn. Face it. If you look away, it will be everywhere at once. I turned. At first I saw nothing but the open hallway and the spill of my bedroom's light. Then my eyes adjusted and the shadows resolved into a shape crouched at the top of the stairs. Small. Still. Child-sized. A wet print beneath one hand splayed on the wood, each fingertip darker where it touched. She tilted her head. Her hair lay in stringy ropes over a face that wasn't quite right, skin too pale, features arranged as if someone had pressed them into a soft mold and misaligned them by a fraction. But her eye, only one visible through the hair, glittered with a careful attention that built a fresh horror inside me, recognition. Not the shock of seeing a stranger, not the delight of seeing a friend, but the quiet certainty of seeing someone you had once held and then lost. Don't, I said, but the rest caught behind my teeth. She stood slowly, carefully, like every joint remembered how to move but needed to rehearse it. Her dress, if that's what it was, might once have been white. Now it was the color of washed-out rust, stiff where it clung to her knees. When she took a step, the fabric tugged, stuck, peeled away with a soft smack from the skin beneath. "Lydia!" I whispered. The name rose unbidden, unearned. Lydia. It should not have fit my mouth. It fit anyway. The sound of it broke something inside me, an old shell, brittle and long forgotten. Memory spilled through the crack, quick and bright and suffocating. A corridor. Not this one, another, lower, older. Stone damp under my hands. The sense of being counted. 7 of us then. A woman humming through a door. The smell of sugar and bleach and rain-wet wool. A ring on a small finger. Small gold, simple. A hand slipping from mine in a dark that pulsed like a lung. Don't. I pressed my palms to my eyes until color swirled in wet constellations. No. No. Not mine. I grew up in apartments, beige and loud, city windows rattling. The denial rang thin and hollow. The images didn't care. They came anyway. I remembered the nursery at the end of the hall, how I had wandered in on my first day and felt the draft kiss the back of my neck. The wallpaper there had boats on it. Tiny blue boats afloat on a cream sea. There had been a crib there once. I'd told myself the realtor's quick smile meant nothing. Now I heard a different voice, older and male and tired, telling a younger woman to make room, to finish the joists, to keep the vents open enough for the singing. The singing had not been songs. It had been air passing through small throats. "Lydia," I said again, and she took another step. My stomach folded in on itself. The ring. The ring I had picked up at the mouth of the tunnel, cold beyond stone. The way it had rolled back into dark when I dropped it, as if the dark had been waiting for it, like a throat swallowing a pill. "He hears you now." The voices in my dreams had said it like a blessing. I had assumed he meant the thing in the walls. The living room that wasn't a room. But there he had been me. I understood that in a flash that left me swaying. He hears you now. He remembers now. He can let you up. My tongue felt thick. "I didn't leave you," I said, though no one had accused me. "I didn't. But I had." The old panic cracked open and spilled its truth. Years ago, small enough to crawl and thin enough to slip between studs, I had squeezed through where the vent shed a draft, and I had gone up into a house that was not a house yet and left behind the hands that caught at my ankles. "Let me, please." I had kicked free. I had been the one who escaped. The house had remembered. The town had helped it forget. Divorce and exhaustion and the cheap price on Belridge Lane had carried me right back to the mouth that had almost shut over me. Donor child, number 7. The phrase scudded across my mind like a paper dragged in a flood. At once ridiculous and exactly shaped to fit a blank I didn't know I had. I could see a ledger now, heavy at the spine, ink bled into the fibers, 7 for the beams. 7 for the heartwood. 7 seatings to keep the frame from splitting. A family with a proud name. A sheriff with his father's badge. A realtor with her father's smile. The house had never been haunted. It had been fed. Lydia reached the bottom step. She stopped 2 paces from me, small chest fluttering. Her mouth worked with a little wet sound, like she was trying to swallow a word. Her remaining eye fixed on my hands, my wrists, the pale lines that cross-hatched my skin like faded maps. Her gaze moved to the wall where the door had been, then to the floor between us, then to the fireplace behind me, to the vent that had come and gone. A shiver passed through her. Not fear. Eagerness. The hum deepened, sank lower, the way a throat hums when someone agrees with you in the dark. "What do you want?" I asked. Her lips parted. A breath escaped, soft and rank, and under it I heard that same word I had scraped from the vent wood, the one I had told myself was only a trick of dust and desperate eyes. "Up," she whispered. It was not just a word. It was a direction. A prayer. A command. The floor beneath my feet warmed. Not dangerously, a fever warmth, the heat of skin against skin after the fear of cold. The boards swelled a little, bulging along the seams as if something beneath them were drawing a deep breath and pressing its ribcage outward. The nails in the planks popped with small, sharp sounds like knuckles cracking. The air filled with a scent so familiar I didn't register it as a smell at first, the sugar and wool from my memory. The bleach. The metallic edge of copper. The sweetness that had stung my throat in the vent. Nursery sweet. I can't, I said. I didn't know what would happen if I did. I knew exactly what would happen if I did. Lydia's face tightened, no anger, no tantrum, something older and more patient. It was a look that said, "You are not the only one the house remembers." And then she wasn't looking at me anymore. She looked beyond, through, past my shoulder, at the living room. The house responded. Wood flexed. Plaster thinned. And there, impossible, simple, inevitable, the vents panel set itself back into the wall beside the hearth, the same age-blackened nails shining like wet teeth. It hung there, ajar. The air that issued from the crack was so cold it smoked. Behind it, not darkness, no. Something like a second surface, slick and pale, shivering with anticipation. Let it up. I took a step. One step. My feet moved like they were remembering a dance I had once known by heart. Lydia did not follow. She watched, hands loose at her sides, head slightly bowed as if this too had been rehearsed. "Don't," something small and late said as I reached the panel. The voice was my own, aged down to a child's register. Don't. I couldn't tell if I was remembering the plea or anticipating the regret. I slid my fingers under the edge of the panel. The wood was damp. It stuck for a breath, then peeled away from the wall with a sucking sound that made the fine hairs on my forearms flare. When the last nail tore free, the smell hit full force, sweet and rotten and clean all at once, a hospital bouquet left too long in a warm room. Beneath, not a tunnel. Not now. The stone had softened. The narrow descended to nowhere because there was nowhere left to descend to. The house had risen to meet it. What waited was a membrane, pale as the inside of a wrist, stretched tight, quivering. It pulsed faintly with that same doubled heartbeat. Thump thump. It was skin. It was door. I pressed my palm to it. The world narrowed to the size of my hand. Heat climbed into my arm. Not unbearable, merely insistent. Sensation poured up my nerves, moisture, pulse, the faintest electric tingle as if a storm were forming in a far field and the hair on my neck was telling me where to look. I felt, knew things moving behind the membrane. Fingers, many, testing for purchase. A brow. A heel. The curve of a shoulder. A crowd. The pressure of them against my palm changed and focused until it wasn't crowd pressure anymore. It was a single touch, small and precise, pressing against the exact center of my hand from the other side, palm to palm through that thin wall. I closed my eyes. Up, I said. The word went out of me like a breath you had held too long. The membrane split with a sound like wet paper torn slowly. Cold air spilled across my knees and thighs. The pressure released and then reversed. Instead of pressing in, it pulled out. Hands slid through, not grabbing, not clawing, simply emerging, slick and shaking. A forearm. A head curled close as a fist, hair plastered to a small skull. Then another. Then another. They were so light I could have counted bones through skin, so cold that where they touched me they left printed arcs that stung a second later like frostburn. They did not look at me. They knew me, knew what had called them, knew the role I'd been shaped to play, and moved past on soft, sure palms, clambering into the living room, their wet feet finding the floor, their shoulders hunching against the too bright air. Dozens. Then more. Tiny shapes and not so tiny ones, figures stalled at all the heights the house had interrupted them at. The hum leveled into a tone so even it was almost silence. My heart matched it, then lagged, then hurried to catch up. I didn't count them. I couldn't. Their passing was a tide, and I was a post driven into a shore that had not existed until a bulldozer cleared room for a dream home on Belridge Lane. Lydia stepped into the room last. She paused beside me, that misaligned face tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. Up close, I saw that her cheek had been stitched at some point, a tidy seam gone messy with time. The thread was the color of old smoke. Without thinking, I reached out. My fingers met her hair. It was slick, yes, but also fine as I remembered in a memory I kept telling myself I did not own. I pushed the ropes back from her forehead. The other eye gazed up at me, cloudy, milked at the rim, iris dark as the space under a bed. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have." I didn't know how to finish the sentence because every way you could finish it was a lie. She lifted her hand. Palm up. Something lay in it. A ring. Small, gold, simple. "You kept it," I thought, "or you found it, or I gave it back." The words all overlapped until the space between them softened like wet drywall. Lydia raised her other hand and held my wrist. Her fingers were the precise measure of the white grooves that banded it. Donor child, number 7. No ledger was necessary now. The house had always known my measure. Behind us, the ones who had come up gathered along the walls, in the corners, around the hearth. They arranged themselves with a grave, quiet order that made my throat ache. No rushing, no tantrums. They had learned patience where time did not pass. The eye in the black room under the stairs, if it had been an eye and not merely a trick of shape and wish, watched without blinking from a place I could not name. The humming changed. It rose and fell and rose again in a pattern that wasn't quite music and wasn't quite breath. The walls flexed. The knob door behind me shivered the way a horse's flank shivers under the bite of a fly, and then, simply, the grain returned. Hinges appeared. The knob formed like a blister and hardened into brass. The front door was back, as if it had only been misplaced. "Is that it?" I asked Lydia, and heard the childlike hope in my voice. "Is it over?" Her head turned toward the door, then back to me. She shook her head once. It wasn't a no. It was a not yet. The house took another breath. And I understood the last secret. Not about what it was. I knew that already. Not about what the town had done. The sheriff's badge had shined in my daydream, and the realtor's smile had cracked like shellac in the heat. No, the final thing was what it wanted now. It wanted out. Not through one child at a time or through a ledger or through a hidden nursery no blueprint would acknowledge. It wanted to be not a house, but a hunger with rooms around it. It wanted up, too. "Then we go," I said. I don't know if that was me speaking, or the piece of me the house had shaped years ago speaking through me, or if my voice had become the house's mouth. Lydia's fingers tightened and, God help me, I wanted the pressure, the contact, the proof of the thing I had done, and the thing I would do next. We walked to the front door together. The brass was cool under my palm. The wood thrummed faintly as if bees had built a hive within it. When I turned the knob, the latch lifted with a gentle click that echoed much too far down into stone and wet and the not hallway, the not room with the eye, the slit places that had been beneath. The door swung inward. Night waited on the porch. Not a star. The air smelled of damp grass and old leaves. Somewhere beyond the hedge, a car passed, untroubled and ordinary, and for a heartbeat I tasted a life I had almost kept. City noise, divorce papers, coffee burned on the hot plate. I stepped aside. They went first. The small ones padded into the night, climbing the threshold with the careful knees of cat burglars, spreading across the porch and down the steps, their wet feet whispering on the wood. They turned their heads in perfect unison toward the street, as if listening for the sound of an old lullaby. A few glanced back at me, not to ask permission or to say thank you, but to mark me the way travelers mark a landmark. Here is the place we began again. Lydia stood on the threshold. She lifted my wrist and, with patient fingers, slid the ring over the bone. It stuck at the knuckle. I'm a grown man. It was never meant for me, and then eased, warm as breath, to sit above the old pale groove. Her lips moved. Don't they shaped. Then, he hears you now. Then up. The three words folded into one another until they became a single shape my mouth could not copy and my ear could not claim. I nodded like I understood. She stepped into the dark. I watched until the night took her. I listened until the silence tripled and quadrupled and became the sound of nothing at all. I stood with my hand on the door, feeling the way the wood leaned fractionally in toward me, like someone not ready to let go of an embrace. I could have shut it then. I could have called the sheriff and the realtor and told them what I thought of heirs and ledgers. I could have struck a match. I could have run. Instead, I stayed. Inside, the living room breathed once more and then settled. The hum retreated to some deep place beneath hearing. The floor cooled. The seams narrowed. The wet prints on the ceiling dried to the faintest brown shadows and then lightened further, as if they had never been prints at all, like clouds sliding apart over a moon. The house stood around me, a shape the night could not swallow, quiet and newly empty, like the moment a held breath becomes a sigh. I don't know how long I stood there before the first distant sound reached me. Tires on gravel, a dog waking and not barking, the thready, wondering voice of a neighbor as a back gate clicked. I did not go to the porch to see. I pressed my wrist to my chest and felt the groove beneath the ring warm where my skin met metal. It wanted up. So I let it up. Now the town will hear what I heard. Now the walls will hum where there are no walls. Now the floorboards of houses that never creaked will groan with the weight of small, cold feet walking not to frighten, but to arrive. The hollow beneath is not beneath anymore. It spreads in the shape of rooms across the dark and into the mouths of all the quiet houses on all the quiet lanes until at last it can breathe like anything else alive. I stand in my living room, eyes on the space where the vent has been and will be and is, and I listen to the night beyond the door. The sound comes very softly at first, like rain finding old gutters. Then it gathers step by step, voice by voice. And when, at last, something small knocks 3 times on my side of the front door, 3 slow, deliberate knocks, I lift my hand and answer from within.